Trump may launch a military campaign against Iran. This is reported by the Wall Street Journal. Journalists state that allegedly the US president has ordered and given the relevant instructions to prepare for strikes on Iran, but he has not yet made a final decision on when this might begin. That is, Trump does not rule this out, and preparations are underway. Fordo is of particular interest. There is special interest in the location of the Iranian nuclear energy center, where Iran could be engaged in the production of nuclear weapons and uranium enrichment, to be precise. And it is precisely this facility that Israel is urging the US to strike. Supposedly, information has already started appearing on social media that bombers capable of carrying bunker busting bombs have already arrived, and they have been seen in the Middle East, and they are ready to carry out these missions. In other words, the situation is escalating. It is further fueled by the fact that there is currently a fierce confrontation between Israel and Iran. Israel continues to strike both Tehran and other cities. But this morning, Iran also delivered a powerful strike against Israel. There is destruction in Tel Aviv and beyond. And unfortunately, there was a strike on a medical facility, a hospital on Israeli territory. This is, in any case, a tragedy and a violation of international humanitarian law. You cannot wage war like this. And accordingly, of course, this must be stopped and prevented. Well, but it seems that even the Israeli air defense system has started to let strikes through heaven, the legendary system. We can see from the sheer number of strikes that Iran is launching, the number of rockets, the forces and means involved, that Israel is struggling to cope. And of course, the destruction may increase. Just as Israel is also carrying out strikes directly against Iran, and Israel has stated that they may even be ready to conduct an operation using special forces at the Fordo facility, which they want to destroy if the Americans do not agree to carry out strikes. At the same time, Zakharova, the spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said that they are calling on the US to refrain and that this could lead to an escalation of the confrontation. And Putin had a phone conversation with Xi Jinping, the leader of China, regarding the situation in the Middle East, and once again stated that he is ready to act as a mediator. The United States, in turn, rejects this mediation because they are considering possible options for, let's say, a possible regime change in Iran, which is also what Israel wants. Because this morning, Israel Katz, the Israeli Minister of Defense, stated that Khamenei has no right to exist. In other words, hinting that they are ready to eliminate Iran's supreme spiritual leader. Meanwhile, Putin is talking about mediation. And Iran is preparing to meet with representatives of European countries, Britain, France, and Germany and Switzerland, in order to try to hold negotiations. However, there won't be any Israelis or representatives from the United States there. In other words, probably the most crucial parties in this context. And the situation could develop in two directions. Why am I telling you all this? Because this directly concerns us as well, since it could draw both the United States into the war and Russia, by the way, into a war in the Middle East. They could also get drawn in there, and possibly even some assistance from China might come into play, and this war will escalate, it will spread. And in fact, it will become yet another major theater of military operations. This means that the Russian-Ukrainian war, unfortunately, may not exactly be forgotten, but it will receive much, much, much less attention. That's why, for us, it's of course important that everything there ends as soon as possible. The world is global, and the processes that are happening right there, right now, are directly related to what is happening on our front, directly and immediately. The point is that if the US does get drawn into the war, and it even comes to a ground operation, because it's practically impossible to end this with just an air campaign. You just have to look at the history of wars in which the United states has participated, especially in the Middle East, and how those ended. That's why this could really lead to escalation, to a certain chaos in the Middle East, to rising oil prices, and to the potential involvement of Turkey and other players, as well as Russia in one way or another, because all of this is still possible. And accordingly, of course, to changes in many aspects. And by the way, in this regard, Russia might start to seriously, well, let's say, come into conflict with the United States. So anything is possible here. A lot is being decided right now. And the situation, in fact, is that there will be a hunt for Ali Khamenei. Apparently, Israel will try to draw the United States in. Whether the US will get involved, we'll see very soon. There is such a possibility and probability, but it's important to understand that this could elicit sympathy from others. Because, for example, in Jordan, people are applauding the strikes on Israel, and the situation is indeed quite complicated. That's why, in fact, all attention is now focused there on how and what will be decided. Because either or, there really is a chance that the dissatisfied population, the opposition that exists in Iran, unlike in Russia, by the way, there have been protests in Iran, unlike in Russia. In Iran, people have come out and truly fought for their rights. Iranians have fought against the spiritual authorities. That is, they have demonstrated their civil disobedience. And that's why many people say that there is a chance for change there, including a change of regime. If there is a chance of regime change, it means that a secular government would come to power, one that would be more friendly and favorably disposed toward the West. Accordingly, that changes a lot of things. This would make it possible to ensure an inflow of investments into Iran and so on. If this does not happen, the opposite scenario is possible. But what if Iranians start to rally around Ali Khamenei? By the way, Putin has started talking about this. It's unclear whether he is actually saying real things or if this is just propaganda and those information psychological operations aimed at everyone, especially the West. So this cannot be ruled out. But still, as of today, there is no sign that Russia is directly sending any shipments, although they have already stated that they are ready to provide humanitarian aid to Iran. Let's hope that this humanitarian aid does not turn into military aid, as is often the case with Putin when they lie, when they start making grand statements. And in fact, this does not correspond to reality. That is, the situation there as of today continues to escalate. Attention is focused there, and the main question is whether the United States will intervene. If they do not intervene, then this war, this exchange of strikes, will gradually subside. Because, after all, if Israel does not go on to eliminate Khamenei and the rest of the Iranian military leadership, if they do not destroy the targets that are of interest to them, specifically weapons depots, missile launchers, and the missiles themselves, which could be hidden in rocks, mountains, or underground, and the number of threats to Israel will only increase because, well, Iran will strike and will strike indiscriminately at civilian targets. This is already noticeable, and in fact, that's the situation. So we need to keep an eye on this. And I should also say a few words about why Israel and Iran are in such conflict. The fact is, this really is about nuclear weapons. It's about the fact that Iran has made the destruction of Israel one of its main goals. Iran sees dangers everywhere, threats everywhere. In this, they are similar. The ruling regime in Iran is in many ways similar to the Russian one. Well, Iran, paradoxically as it may sound, actually wants to be the leader in the Middle East, a center of attraction, a center of ancient culture, as they themselves point out, and so on. So here, there is also powerful ideological and civilizational conflict. It concerns nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, regime change, and in addition, civilizational aspects. This is also something that needs to be understood. As for military potential, Israel has more high tech weaponry. Israel has better intelligence. Israel has better capabilities in special forces, airborne operations, speed, and immediacy. It has clearly demonstrated this through the successes of the IDF and Mossad. But Iran has a large number of troops and a significant number of missiles, as Western analysts say, and these are missiles of various types. These include both older and newer missiles. Iran has not yet used analogs of the Russian Rechnik missiles, but Iran does possess similar missiles. Iran has accumulated a large number of ballistic missiles and drones, which they use less themselves because they have transferred many to Russia for Russia to carry out its terrorist strikes. And unfortunately, Iran has become an accomplice in this war against Ukraine. Well, in fact, besides that, Iran has significant naval capabilities, including a greater number of submarines primarily than Israel has. And that is why they can block the Strait of Hormuz, which would mean cutting off access to certain countries such as Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and so on. In other words, this would lead to a crisis in transportation and, most importantly, in oil transport. And this affects us as well because if oil prices rise, it doesn't just directly enrich Russia, making it a beneficiary of the situation, but gasoline prices will go up everywhere, including in Ukraine. And this will somewhat worsen our economic situation. That's why I say that it's in our interest for everything to be resolved through negotiations, for things to go well in Geneva and not just there. And for the situation to stabilize and ultimately for the US to agree to set a price cap on Russian oil at a maximum of $45, no higher, at least so, although it needs to be at least 40, 35, even lower, but let it be at least that, that would already be a good, a really positive outcome for us.